Hi, and welcome to our second video of Unit 2, 1607 to 1754. Today we're going to be looking at the regions of British colonies. So we're going to be doing a little bit of comparison today. So as you can see on here are all of our Unit 2 topics, and as I just mentioned, today we're going to be focusing on topic 2.3, the regions of British colonies. So let's get started. So our major question here is how and why did environmental and other factors shape the development and expansion of various British colonies? And they really did develop and shape really differently. So we're going to look at that today. So we're going to start with the Chesapeake colonies and North Carolina. The Chesapeake colonies can include what is today Virginia and Maryland. You can see that here, and North Carolina. So the initial settlement in the British colonies really was in Jamestown, Virginia. That was in 1607. Now, these colonies grew pretty slowly at first in the 17th century. They weren't very healthy. They were tidewater areas. They were very humid. They had a great deal of mosquitoes, which means they had a lot of malaria as well. Other problems included dysentery and typhoid. As a result of that, a lot of people died. There was actually a pretty short life expectancy. Now, they did grow mainly because new settlers were coming from England fairly often. These colonies really relied on an exportation of tobacco. And interestingly enough, that tobacco was initially cultivated by mostly white male indentured servants. Now, if you don't remember from previous history classes, indentured servants were people who could not afford usually their own price of a ticket to get across the Atlantic. So they sold their service for a certain term of years, often about 7 years, in which they would labor for the person they sold their service to. And at the end of 7 years, they would go free to labor for themselves. Now, sometimes at the end of that indentured servitude, there would be some sort of grant of land or money to help them begin their new life. But either way, indentured servants were basically one way that many people could get to the Americas from Europe, many impoverished people or many commoners. Okay, so mostly tobacco is going to be cultivated by indentured servants, and this is all the way up to about 1676. This is Bacon's Rebellion. Okay, so what we see is in Virginia, we see a lot of Indian raids along the western frontier. A lot of the frontier areas were made of smaller farmers, and these smaller farmers were really pretty incensed because the governor of Virginia, William Berkeley, didn't really do too that much to help protect them from Indian raids. And part of the reason for this was that he had a pretty good relationship with most Native Americans because of the fur trade, and he didn't want to risk disrupting that. So ultimately, the governor didn't really do anything about this. And then the farmers really saw the governor and wealthy planters as sort of corrupt and controlling. And this is really going to come to a head in 1676 when this guy, Nathaniel Bacon, who was actually himself a gentleman planter but fallen on hard times, led a huge revolt and uprising against the governor of 1,000 men. Lots of people died. And ultimately, it ended mainly because Bacon died from disease, as many people did in these areas, and many of his followers as well. One of the reasons we talk about this is the main significance, a really big, significant result of this was that many of the rebels were armed white indentured servants. And it convinced planters in these regions, in Virginia, but also North Carolina, that having armed white servants was just not a safe labor force. And it ultimately forced a lot of them to turn to sources of enslaved labor from Africa. So we're going to see this real shift in the late 17th century to having a white laboring force to having an enslaved African laboring force. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in another video. Okay, so let's move on to the New England colonies. And you can see at the time, New England in the 17th century really consisted of sort of this area here, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Hartford, really. This area, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, was initially settled by Puritans. Puritans were Protestants who felt that simply the Church of England, which was a Protestant denomination itself, had become too corrupt. They wanted to purify it. They felt the Church of England was still too much like the Catholic Church, too gaudy, too ostentatious, not enough focused on God and religion. So essentially, the Puritans Many of them did settle in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Now, the climate of this area was very cold, cold, brutal winters, really hot summers, and terribly, terribly rocky soil. Um, this meant that the area was not good for plantations. It was not good for cash crops. What you ended up really seeing were a lot of families migrating because, if they were migrating for some manner of religious freedom or economic prosperity, a lot of them came with their families, the Puritans, and that meant that there were a lot of small landholders, a lot of smaller farms. Okay, so we don't see the plantation economy developing in New England like it does in the southern colonies and the Chesapeake Bay colonies. Also, this area was a lot less ethnically diverse than any other really British colonial region. And part of that is because, again, the soil was very rocky. It wasn't as appealing to non-British settlers. And the Puritans were really dominant there, so they weren't as tolerant as other religions, other Protestant religions, even. So that was pretty unappealing to a lot of people. So really, they were a lot less ethnically diverse, this area. Ultimately, they did create a pretty thriving economy. It was a mixed economy. They did have agriculture. They had small land holdings, hunting and fishing especially. This area became known for fishing, cod especially. And they really had excellent natural harbors and very dense forests. So it was actually great for shipbuilding. So what we see by the 18th century, especially the end of the 18th century, and we're getting close to the Revolution, we're seeing a lot of the American ships that ultimately make up the American Navy come from this area. Okay, let's move on to the middle colonies, the ones that often are kind of forgotten a little bit. These are New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So what we see here, there are some large agricultural estates. These areas were actually known as the bread colonies for their exports of grain. They definitely did not use the amount of slave labor that we see in the southern colonies. But they did have a lot more agriculture, or larger agriculture, than the New England colonies. They also had quite a few large rivers that allowed for them to tap into the interior fur trade and more backcountry settlement. They also had a very thriving trade and commerce in port cities like New York and Philadelphia. Again, they had great natural harbors. And unlike New England, they were very ethnically mixed. There were a lot of settlers from different parts of Europe, not just Britain, because of their kind of unusual amount of religious tolerance. The Quakers were a denomination that lived in this region, and they were very, very religiously tolerant. So this unusual amount of religious tolerance led to a lot more of an ethnic, cultural, and religious mixing in these areas. Also, land was pretty desirable and was much more easily available than it was in New England, where you have it dominated by the Puritans, or in the southern colonies, where it's dominated by these elite planters. So this desirable land is more easily available to a variety of different settlers, and there's just more social and economic democracy, which is why you saw such an ethnic diversity in the middle colonies compared to other British colonial regions. Okay, so let's get into the southern colonies in the British West Indies. So when we talk about the southern colonies, just for the purpose of the British colonies in the 17th century, we're really talking about South Carolina and Georgia, and also the British West Indies, which I do not have pictured here. So these developed plantation economies. They had really long growing seasons. They had a warm, humid environment. It was very friendly to cash crops like rice, indigo, cotton, and sugar. They were very reliant on slave labor, especially in the West Indies. In the West Indies, sugar was the dominant crop. It was very expensive to produce. It required quite a bit of processing, and it really motivated planters to look for the cheapest labor source possible, which of course was slavery. There's nothing cheaper than a source of labor that you do not have to pay. So this really, really backbreaking and challenging work processing these cash crops are going to lead into a great deal of enslaved labor. Okay, last little bit I'm going to talk about for this video is the concept of salutary neglect. So the colonies in British North America created these self-governing institutions that were really unusually democratic for the time period. Now, I don't want to confuse you and imply that it was perfect democracy, because certainly, mostly it was male white property owners. But still, that was a lot more democratic than in European states, for example, where really it was the nobility that had the greatest voice in government. They're pretty far distance from Britain, and the fact that Britain paid pretty lax attention to British North America allowed for these governing institutions to really appear. Britain was a lot more focused on the very profitable sugar plantations and trade of the West Indies. And so they kind of, ignored North America to a certain extent. So the New England colonies, for example, had these participatory town meetings, and those town meetings would elect members and then send them to the colonial legislatures. In the Southern colonies, it was a little bit less democratic. The elite planters really exercised the power both locally and in the elected assemblies. But either way, despite the presence of royally appointed colonial governors that were usually only there maybe for a term of service before returning to Britain, these colonies functioned with a very high degree of political autonomy. They were really kind of running themselves to a certain extent. And obviously, they were still paying taxes to Britain and had to follow certain British laws. And yes, they did absolutely consider themselves to be British citizens. They still did have a lot of experience of self-governance. Now, this time period is usually referred to as a period of salutary neglect. Salutary literally means beneficial, so beneficial neglect. And this is definitely going to be something that's going to help lead us into, to a certain extent, the revolution as conditions change in the late 18th century. And we're going to talk about that more in Unit 3.